I will say that for myself, it's an ongoing process. I'm in my 40s, my mid 40s this year, and I am just starting to learn to be okay with myself and not take everything that the people around me, friends and family, say at face value. And there was definitely a shame moment when I lost my job in 2020 and chose to be now an entrepreneur, essentially, or self-employed. I wasn't actually ashamed myself of being laid off. Thankfully, because I've been in HR, I know it doesn't mean anything. Insert swear word here. It does not mean anything related to my actual worth, but there were still the questions from my parents of how, I'm going to have lunch with auntie and uncle. What should I say about your job status, right? And I was like, I get where you're coming from, and I don't care. Like, I lost my job. That's what it is, right? But so even though my parents were not trying to shame me, but I could tell they were a little bit ashamed, maybe, or embarrassed, or said they were trying to protect how I was being perceived. And I'm like, can we just be real about this, right? Like, there's nothing wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. So it is what it is. Right. And now going and becoming a coach and running my own business as a solo woman, Asian, immigrant person is the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life, and goes against all of the ideas of financial safety, stability, everything that I feel like I've learned or have been striving for as the vision of success, right? So, good Lord, it's huge. And so why don't we get into some coaching tips and maybe some lessons learned about that. But just before that, yes, Jennifer, were you looking at a...
Oh, I was just saying there is a question in the comments.
Yes. Yes.
I need to process that question for a second.
Okay. So this is...
I kind of want to understand more what the...
Yeah. I'm not sure either exactly how to answer this, and maybe it's because I'm not sure. So the question here, I'll just read a little bit of it, is about how does the faith worldview come into the discussion, and a discussion about secularization of public. Yeah, I'm not sure about the public spaces and separating it from culture. So maybe we can't see who the user is, but maybe if you could put a little bit more detail there, and we'll try and come back to this. That would be helpful, I think, for us. And in the meantime, let's try and address some of the risk issues and how we're dealing with the risk. And just before we do that, actually, Jennifer, maybe you want to share a little bit about your coaching programs and how the coaching programs relate to this.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So as I mentioned in my introduction, I have a passion to help Asian professionals redefine success. And the way I've been doing that is just through my own experiences and having coached over 250 multicultural professionals at this point, and seeing that consistent themes that we've been talking about today. And so I've accumulated that all into a program that I call a keystone program that I call NEC, Inspiring Asian Women. It's a leadership advancement program. So if you want to be taking more risks, but just feel like constrained by either your cultural obligations or unsure about how to best navigate the ambiguous world of the corporate environment, which is so ambiguous, by the way, I'm here to help. Like I said, sometimes our dreams are dreams that my pastor says you do while you're awake, and you can't always fulfill those dreams by yourself. You do need help. And if risk taking is something you want to do, but you find it hard to do, you don't have to do it by yourself. So definitely, I'm here to support you. You can check out, I think Rosie's going to put in, if you don't have it already, the link to my website. And my website, once you get on there, you can schedule a complimentary breakthrough session with me. And we can talk about my Keystone program, how that can support you if risk taking is something, a journey that you would like to take more of. And then, just overcoming those fears. I'm here for you and willing to support you. And then also, because it's AAPI month, I also have some AAPI month specials with my coaching program. So I hope you can reach out, if anything, just to discuss how I can better support you.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And it's similar for me. I mean, you can, I won't spend too much time on it. You can check out my LinkedIn profile. I put into the comments earlier a link to my resources page. It's totally free. It has a lot of resources about trauma and how trauma and race and just covering all the different lenses again that I had talked about earlier on. So feel free to go to that link. It should be at the top of the comments. And I'm just flashing it across the screen as well. And there's also more information there about my coaching programs. If you would like some more individual customized help, I'm more than happy to be a journey partner for you as well. Okay. So on to the coaching tips that we have. Jennifer, maybe kick us off and share a couple of tips that have helped you or could help others in the way they view their risk.
Okay, so I would say that as we've been doing and exploring together here today is I always encourage before we do any acting or doing any change, we spend a lot of time up front self-reflecting pretty much, right? Self-reflecting is like putting a mirror in front of you. You have to look at it. Whatever it is that you want to do differently or change, it's really important to just spend that time up front to self-reflect, like what gets in the way of you doing what you want to do. If it's risk-taking, because that's what we're talking about here today, or being more bold or more courageous or more confident, like let's take a moment and think like what is getting in the way. We know we can read so many books on being more confident. There's lots of tips out there from people who've been confident or ambitious or truly successful. So lots of books out there on how to do it. But then what makes it challenging for you? So self-reflecting is so important and we can never gloss over it. But I know we're so good about being doers as human beings, right? We always want to act. We always want to, we get excited. So then we might skip a couple of steps. But I always feel like just taking a pause for a second to just make sure we understand like what gets in the way of you being more risk-taking or whatever it is. And then also think about like from your identity, like who do you want to be as part of that self-reflection time is like, how do I want to show up in the world? Like, what is the person that I want to be? And it's your definition of it, right? It doesn't matter what Jennifer thinks, what your family thinks your identity needs to be. It's really like, who do you want to be? And getting more comfortable in that space. So culture is a big influence. So maybe there's parts of your culture you do appreciate and want to honor, and that's going to show up in who you want to be. And then maybe there's aspects of our culture that we don't want to embrace and carry forward, and that's okay too. So I think we always need to be in choice, and as long as we feel like we have choices, that self-reflection is so important. And I mean, like I said, it's May already. I've been self-reflecting a long time on my identity as an Asian American. And so it's always a continuing effort as well, self-reflecting. The other suggestion I have is, regardless of whether you think you are a risk taker or not, I would say just go ahead and challenge yourself, right? Just go ahead and push through that discomfort. But I would say don't do it until you know why. Why are you doing it, right? So the self-reflection has to come first, because you want to make sure you do it for yourself. Don't do it because you're trying to prove it to somebody else. Like this has to be something you want to do for yourself by challenging, doing more challenging things. For me, challenging myself looks like being more open to new experiences. Being more open to being playful. I think because we grew up in such rigidity, I feel like that's part of who I am. I love structure, but do I really love structure? That's all I know is structure. Because there was a point in my life where I was creative. Like I love dancing, I love music, I love drawing, but I haven't done that in a long time. So what happened to those days? So now I want to be more playful. I want to find more hobbies. So that's how I'm challenging myself. And then also just being open to making mistakes. Like if someone gets upset at me, of course I want to get that feedback and I never want to hurt someone. I always want to do it with kindness, but I need to be open to those mistakes Otherwise, how will I ever grow as a person? So yeah, just challenge yourself so you can learn and grow. If you have to be a trailblazer, so be it. First to go to do something. Unfortunately, there is not a lot still of Asian representation in corporate America. There's still far fewer Asians who are CEOs. I think the last research I saw, only 40 of the Fortune 500 company CEOs are identified as Asian. And so you're right. When you look at modeling, there's not a lot of people ahead of you that you can model from. So if you need to be a trailblazer, awesome, do it, right? Just challenge yourself is what I offer here.
Thank you. I've just been reflecting myself as you've been sharing on some of the ideas that I have, and they're actually very linked to what you've already shared. Maybe what I'm sharing could actually be a bit of a structure. Talk about taking the risk of being playful. That is definitely a risk for me because I'm used to associating playfulness with embarrassment or even shame. Like I didn't know how to be playful in a way where I didn't feel embarrassed about myself for various reasons. But anyway, yes, here's potentially some structure for that. 3 steps or a process to work through as you're self-reflecting. And that's to accept, to ask, and to assess. So if I was to break it down, and I'll use myself as an example because I just shared that being an entrepreneur now after I lost my job is the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life in all sorts of ways. And when I think about how I feel about it and the risk of being an entrepreneur, sometimes actually avoiding risk is not actually about avoiding the activity itself. It's about avoiding the thoughts or the feelings that we have around that activity. And sometimes we confuse what are feelings with actual thoughts, right? So in my example of being an entrepreneur, I'm not necessarily afraid of entrepreneurship itself. And yes, of course, it is less stable income than being a full-time employee. But one of the reasons I'm being an entrepreneur and not an employee is that comes with some risks I hadn't seen before, like the risk of a toxic work environment and the risk of burnout and stress and all sorts of bad things that could happen to me. So it's not entrepreneurship itself that I'm afraid of. It's the stress and the pain, and the, potential poverty, right? If I don't make any money, or failure if I don't succeed as a coach, and how I might be perceived, or how my parents might think of me, or how I see myself, for that matter, and my own self-esteem as that. So as I work through, and there are exercises that we can do to kind of separate cognitively feelings from thoughts, from needs. But it's helpful to just identify and recognize, what I'm feeling here is fear, shame, worry, anxiety. And that's different from the thought of, I might fail, or I don't know how to do this, or no one's ever done this before, that sort of thing. And that's also different from the actual risk around being an entrepreneur. So accepting that we have feelings and thoughts, and accepting then that they're not the same as the risk is part 1. Part 2, about asking is, okay, there are obviously risks associated with it. And the fears that drive those risks, where do they come from? Like, whose fears are they? Whose risks are they that I'm taking on? In some cases, as we've been discussing this whole time, it may come from our upbringing. It may, and I'm just going to show the lens picture again, because I think it's pertinent. Something I've learned by looking through different lenses is actually it's not so much from my parents or even me. It could be the very real risk of being an Asian woman in the workplace. It's the risks that come, or the fears that come from societal and Western and white supremacy and patriarchy that say, as a woman, you can't do this. As an Asian woman, this is how you are. What will your culture think of you? Are you representing your culture? How should you be as a leader at work? And then all those things combined, right? So out of all of that, somewhere is my true self, my true beliefs, what I want to do. Jen, I relate to what you were sharing about creativity. I used to love to write. I used to have a vivid imagination. I guess I still have a vivid imagination. Sometimes it's imagining all the things that could go wrong. So I wonder, if I was to put those powers to good, now I'm kind of a content creator. I love to write blogs, right? And that's a creativity I never thought I had. So that's the ask part. And then the last thing is to assess. And that is, of course, related to everything we've discussed, especially the lenses.